are joining us online. My name is Catherine Bush, and it is good to gather in these ways on these Sunday mornings. So thank you for being here or being here, however you're joining in the conversation this morning. We're glad you're a part of it. Particularly today, because we have a wonderful conversation that we are delighted to be a part of and at several layers. Our speaker and guest today is Dorothy Svgdik. She is the Curator of Exhibits at the Museum of Science and History, which you may know as the Pink Palace. And she is here today to talk to us about the current exhibit there, RiseUp, Stonewall and the LGBTQ rights movement, and particularly this local expression of it, the Memphis piece, Memphis Proud, the resilience of a Southern LGBTQ plus community. And this is really two exhibits, I think, I understand. There's a national traveling exhibit that started at the museum in DC and is making its way around the country, and MoSH has brought it here to Memphis, thankfully. And then there's a parallel local story, the story of the movement in Memphis. And Calvary is featured in that story, courtesy of the grand efforts of our own Vincent Astor and many others who were interviewed and who submitted pictures and who shared their own stories in so many ways. So it's really lovely to have all of these kind of threads tied together. Before she joined MoSH, that's what we call it, right? Just MoSH, okay. Dorothy was the exhibitions coordinator at the Metal Museum, more Calvary connections, and she graduated from Rhodes and got her master's in museum studies at the University of Washington. While at Rhodes, she worked with Choices and with the National Civil Rights Museum, and she made her way back to Memphis from Washington via Texas, so her journey has taken her literally from one side of the country to the other, but we're glad she's back home here. Just a flag, as you're listening to the conversation, I know you'll be inspired. We'll have some time for questions and conversation toward the end. And if you want more, and my guess is that you're gonna want more and you're gonna wanna see this exhibit, join us today. At 2:30, a group of Calvary folk are gonna take a tour of the exhibit. We'll meet there at 2:30, so you need to provide your own transportation. We're not meeting here, we're meeting there. Join us today at 2:30 at MoSH, and we'll walk through the exhibit together, and then hopefully have some time to sit together and reflect about what we've seen and learned. So I hope that you'll join us for that. And now, I'm delighted to bring Dorothy up. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, good morning. I'm going to get my notes going. It's so nice to be here with you all today. Thank you so much, Reverend Bush, for the invitation. Thank you all for coming to hear me speak about these exhibits. It's something we're really excited about. So any opportunity I get to come and kind of plug the exhibits and also talk about all the amazing things we've learned is always welcome. So I appreciate it. So nice to be here with you all. Around. Awesome. So thank you for that wonderful introduction as well. But like Reverend Bush said, I'm here to talk to you all today about two exhibits we currently have on view at MoSH and talk a little bit about our journey curating Memphis Proud, the resilience of a Southern LGBTQ plus community, which is the local component, how we kind of approach that project, some of the things we learned, and some of the things we hope you all can take away from the exhibit, which you'll hopefully come to see. Oh, perfect. So I thought I'd start by just sharing a little bit about MoSH, and you all probably are thinking the Pink Palace in your heads when you hear that. And that's, yeah, MoSH is kind of the next iteration, kind of rebrand of the Memphis Pink Palace Museum. But again, just a little bit about the history of the organization and kind of where we're headed now, which will lay the groundwork for me talking about the exhibit specifically. So we became the Memphis Museum of Natural History and Industrial Arts in March of 1930. So we've had an amazing journey as a museum and a community partner over the years. And we kind of started with this really regional focus with an iconic collection. So how many of you all have been to the Pink Palace at MoSH? Right. Are there any particular objects you think of when you think of MoSH? The shrunken head. I hear a lot, the polar bear. The circus is another popular one. So you can really keep going, right? And I think that's something we really take to heart is we're in a really specific place in our community, and that people have a lot of nostalgia when they think about the Pink Palace or MoSH, and a lot of people have grown up with us and coming to visit the museum. I can't tell you the number of times I hear, oh, I used to go for field trips, or I grew up going with my parents. So we're really lucky to have a very particular position within Memphis and within our region. And, I think coming from that, in 2020, we were lucky enough to bring on a new executive director, Kevin Thompson, who initiated kind of a time of change. And we all know 2020 was a time of change for everyone, and we're still kind of in that period of change. But, with our new leadership, we really took a moment to sit down, think about who we were as an organization, what kind of role we wanted to play in our community, and how we wanted to engage them. So we rebranded to MoSH, which I think we're still getting used to that for a lot of folks. But beyond that, we did some internal soul searching and kind of worked with a lot of external stakeholders, people in our community, to think about a new mission, vision, and guiding principles to take us forward with what we want to do and who we want to be in the community. So you can see our mission here. We seek to inspire discovery through collecting, preserving, and interpreting the cultural histories and natural sciences that shape our region. So really having this regional focus, taking what only we can do, combining those natural sciences with that cultural history to tell the story of the Mid-South, of Memphis, of our community. And to that end, we envision a community of people who share a richer understanding of one another and the world around us. And to achieve this mission and vision, we have a few guiding principles that help us do that. So advocating for authenticity. That means exploring varying perspectives of any given topic or situation, committing ourselves to accuracy, but also committing ourselves to engage with some of the more difficult parts of history. History can be hard. Science can also be controversial, but we really want to not shy away from that, to be able to do justice for our community. We also achieve our mission and vision through magnifying belonging. So we really want to create active audiences and engage our community, and a lot of this is through sharing some authority and being open to co-creating alongside our community and listening to those voices. We also do achieve our mission through embodying holistic stories, so portraying a complete picture of the region and its history, keyword being complete, leaning into that idea of being holistic and representative of our community. And then finally, constructing intersections, welcoming common spaces and being able to foster really meaningful dialogue and interactions between our visitors and between ourselves as staff and our community. So this is just a little taste of what we're hoping to do and who we're hoping to be moving forward. And one way, and I laid all of this out for you, I know it feels kind of jargony, but one way we achieve all of this is through our exhibitions. And I think RiseUp and Memphis Proud are a really great example of us being in step with this new path forward. So according to a 2020 study from the Movement Advancement Project, there are roughly 3.6 million LGBTQ plus adults, including around 525,000 transgender adults that live in the South. And that's more than any other region in the United States. It was really astounding to me to learn that, because when you think of LGBTQ plus history and community, at least for me before I got into this project, I thought San Francisco, New York City, maybe Chicago, a little bit Atlanta if we're getting into the South. But that fact is really staggering. It's really an incredible amount of LGBTQ plus community is just right here. There are neighbors, there are friends, there are coworkers. So, these exhibits kind of came about as we were taking stock of, as an institution, and acknowledging whose stories we're telling, what stories we have yet to tell, and kind of the hidden nature of LGBTQ plus history regionally and nationally as well. So 2020, we have new leadership. We decide to take a risk. We've seen this exhibit called RiseUp that the museum curated, and we want to bring that here to Memphis. From the outset, though, it was also really important to think how to supplement that story with what's going on in Memphis and in our community. So we take a really big gamble. We send in a proposal to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, really big federal funder, hoping to get some support for this project. We knew it was going to be a big undertaking, and then we waited and waited and waited with bated breath until the great news came that we received support from IMLS to do all of this great work, but then we had to do it. And it was a huge project, which was very exciting, but also very daunting. Again, such a time of change for the institution, this big project, and we knew too, if we're gonna do it, we wanna do it well, and we wanna do it authentically, and kind of embodying that mission, vision, and those guiding principles. But what you're seeing on the screen right here is a direct quotation from our IMLS grant proposal. And I think this is something that's always stood out to me in the language of that proposal, and I think tells you a little bit of our thinking and why we wanted to do this as an institution. But MoSH is the largest cultural and natural history museum in the Memphis region, but the majority of the permanent exhibits are over 40 years old and do not reflect the diversity of the local community. Specifically, there are no exhibits that consider the unique experiences of LGBTQ plus Memphians. So that's not to say that there isn't diversity represented in our exhibits and they aren't grounded in research and, best practice kind of interpretation, but there are some gaps, right? And this was one major gap that we realized. And so through pursuing this grant with IMLS, we sought to start to fill that gap and to be able to think about and talk about this really important history to our region. Oh, too fast, too fast. Okay. So, RiseUp and Memphis Proud. Again, RiseUp is the national component, but Memphis Proud is the first exhibit of its kind for our city. And it's first of its kind for the museum, too. Again, I just talked about how we hadn't really been exhibiting LGBTQ plus history and culture in Memphis. So we knew because this was an unprecedented topic to start exploring, we knew we needed to take an unprecedented approach. And so, MoSH has worked with community members in the past to curate exhibits. Exhibits don't happen in a vacuum. You really have to, be talking to the experts, the people with the lived experiences. But that kind of informed our approach, again, knowing we needed to push that even further to be able to work directly with the community to do these stories justice. And from the outset, the goal of this exhibit was never to present a definitive history. It was just, with our time constraints and our first foray into this, we just knew it wasn't an achievable thing because there's so many different experiences and it's such a rich, diverse LGBTQ plus community here, but we knew what we wanted to do was start a conversation about the importance of uncovering LGBTQ plus history in Memphis and acknowledging the impact of that specific history and culture on our region more broadly. So we did that, or kind of approached the idea of starting a conversation in a few different ways. The first was this idea of centering on community voices, kind of above all else. In addition to knowing we weren't doing a definitive history, some of the things we felt from the outset curating this exhibit were we knew we wanted it to be representative, holistic, empathetic, and authentic. And so those were some of the kind of buzzwords we kept coming back to as we were approaching this project, is figuring out how to infuse everything we're doing with those qualities. Another way, or kind of approach we had to curating this exhibit was establishing a community advisory committee. So it was set with individuals and organizations that are really active in the LGBTQ plus community. And again, a small fraction of that, because there are so many diverse stories, incredible organizations, that we could only take a slice of it. But we worked with a really incredible group. The group kind of fluctuated and grew over time, but this group met with us monthly to help us think about our key themes in the exhibit. What are the things we need to talk about? Who do we need to talk to? What are some of the objects we have to tell the story of the LGBTQ plus community? They also provided feedback on other aspects. They really guided our programming. So our community engagement team partnered with members of our advisory committee to think about what are other ways we can augment the exhibit? What are some opportunities we can invite the community into the museum or go out into the community? And then they also advised on things like marketing and merchandising. So this community advisory committee was really like, they were our kind of North Star in doing this and keeping us on task and keeping us to the idea of creating an empathetic, authentic, holistic exhibit. Another kind of key aspect of our approach is tied to the Community Advisory Council, but this idea of outreach and partnerships. So the committee was only one small part of the way we reached out to our community. There was so much networking, and we were really lucky that every person we approached to help us with this project, I left literally every conversation I had with 4 more email addresses, 3 more phone numbers saying, you have to talk to this person. They're going to be so excited to help. This is an important perspective for you all to bring to the exhibit. We also kind of approached our outreach and partnerships in a really strategic way. So we were lucky enough to, through the IMLS grant, be able to hire 3 interns to help us with this project. 2 came from Rhodes, 1 from University of Memphis. And my supervisor was really intentional with the hiring of those interns, 2 of which identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community. So even in thinking about who we're bringing on to help us do this, being really intentional with who's brought on. Another example of that is we contracted with local drag artist and community programmer, Moth, to help us tell the story of drag in Memphis. And we were able to source some really amazing objects, tell a really well-rounded story because of Moth and Moth's connections within the community. And that also extends to some of our kind of sponsorships too. Our director of development worked really hard to reach out to employee resource groups and other organizations at businesses and corporations who might be interested in supporting this exhibit and helping us achieve our goals. Beyond looking outward to our community for information, we also had to do a lot of research, a lot of primary source research. While we have some amazing secondary sources, they're pretty few and far between that are really diving into the history of LGBTQ plus Memphis. So that meant myself and other people on the exhibits team, a lot of intern time was spent at the Memphis Public Library. We relied on the University of Memphis Special Collections, the Rhodes College Digital Archive. So a lot of our work was looking through incredible wealth of information in publications from the 70s through today that exist in these really incredible LGBTQ plus publications that were circulating at different points in time. So it was a lot of very diligently combing through those, finding what evidence we have to tell the story we want to tell. So it was a lot of kind of first-person primary research. And a lot of that, too, is then corroborated or given direction through the oral history project we underwent. I spoke earlier about wanting to center on community voices and elevating those. And as a part of this project, we undertook this oral history component where we spoke with a handful of people in our community and really just chronicled their stories. We partnered with Ray Rico at Focus Magazine, V2 Media to help us do this. And we've got these amazing oral histories now, present diverse experiences throughout our community. They're on view in the exhibit, so you'll be able to see them. I'm going to show you a few clips in a bit, some little sneak peek, but fun news too, this oral history compilation has gained so much success that we're actually partnering with WKNO to screen it. So it's really amazing to be able to share those first-person accounts, that lived experience, with our community in a broader way. And then finally, this last kind of component to our approach was this idea of sustained engagement. Cool, from June to September, we're gonna have an exhibit about the LGBTQ plus community in Memphis. Where do we go from there? What do we do with that? How do we create a more inclusive museum that's thinking about how we're bringing this community and these stories into what the museum is doing at every level? And how do we move forward, fostering inclusivity at the museum? So those are just a couple of things that were on our mind as we were figuring out how are we going to do this? What are some of the ways or things we need to think about as we're diving in? So I've talked all about our approach, but I didn't mention any objects, really. What's an exhibit without objects? What's a museum without objects? So that was something we knew we needed to take into account and be really intentional on how we were thinking about as well. And being able to expand our LGBTQ plus collection at the museum was kind of a side goal of this project, and thinking about, again, sustaining our engagement by growing our collection, representing more stories. So at the outset of this project, we had around 70 objects in MoSH's LGBTQ plus collection. I want to give a shout out to Vincent Astor for supplying many, if not most, of those objects. So thank you, Vincent. But many of those objects, as you can see, we had some incredible buttons, there were some t-shirts, some documents, many of which are pertaining to pride celebrations, and so it was a really good foundation for us to start with, but we knew we wanted more and we needed more to tell the depth of the story we wanted to tell. So we relied heavily on outside loans from private individuals as well as organizations to help us tell our story and kind of populate this exhibit. So RiseUp has about 70 objects on display. We came in with about 60, which is something we are incredibly proud of. 70 objects to tell the national story. We brought 60 just to tell the Memphis story. So I think that tells you just how rich the history of this community in Memphis is, but also the generosity of the people we connected with, being willing to share things and help us do this. And again, the excitement from the community and being able to see yourself represented in a museum and your story. And it was just really a humbling experience because we were literally invited into people's lives. Some of the 60 objects come from personal photo albums, personal letters and correspondence between people. Like, folks really just opened their hearts to us to do this. And it's one of the most humbling things, honestly. But without the community support, we wouldn't have been able to do this exhibit. So now I'm going to help demystify some of the confusion about, is it one exhibit? Is it two exhibits? What are they? So it is two exhibits, one of which is RiseUp, which you can see a little bit of a photo of here now. RiseUp was curated by the museum and is a traveling exhibit, so we got it from Illinois, and I think we're sending it to Texas once it's shown in Memphis. But this exhibit chronicles the national LGBTQ plus civil rights struggle. It highlights key events and individuals who are important to that history from Stonewall, the Stonewall Uprising through today. And for those that don't know, the Stonewall Uprising took place in June of 1969 when the police raided the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village in New York City. And it wasn't the first police raid of an LGBTQ plus establishment, nor was it the first protest of kind of police brutality and advocacy for LGBTQ plus rights. But it was really a culmination of these kinds of efforts, really inspired by what else was going on in the socio-political climate of the time and all of the activism happening in the 60s. And it gained a lot of mass media attention, kind of made a lasting impact. So a lot of people credit Stonewall with like the start of a lot more political activism to come within the LGBTQ plus community. The exhibit, in addition to centering itself and kind of grounding its story in the Stonewall Uprising, it explores how LGBTQ plus Americans navigate and overturn oppression and discrimination, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's in running for public office, access to social services, ability to get married. So it kind of covers a lot of those things that derive from the quest for First Amendment freedoms, so freedom of speech, press, assembly, and petition. You also see a little bit of, things that are happening in pop culture and legislation and revolution and protest, and how the LGBTQ plus community has borrowed from other kind of civil rights movements, like the American Civil Rights Movement, anti-war protests, even feminism a little bit too. So that is Rise Up. It's this kind of overarching national story focused on the quest for First Amendment freedoms. Memphis Proud is a little different than that. So we wanted to tell a uniquely Memphis story. We wanted to bring this national lens home. What do all of these things look like in Memphis? How do they function? How does community make change here? Like I said earlier, there's a lot of focus on the coast, what's going on in New York or California, and there's a lack of representation of the middle, or specifically what's happening in the South. So we sought to investigate and kind of challenge some of these conceptions of the South as inhospitable to LGBTQ life, like not disregarding that it's a little different, more difficult in some ways in the South, but dismantling this idea that there's just no LGBTQ plus history or culture happening here. You gotta go hundreds of miles to find that. LGBTQ plus Memphians, since the city's founding, have created dynamic community and advocated for acceptance here and across the region. And they've made Memphis a more inclusive and welcoming place for everyone. So this exhibit is a celebration of the people, the organizations, and the events that shape this city's LGBTQ plus community, and in turn, our community at large. What we really discovered is there are hidden depths, and we really only scratched the surface of the incredible rich history of this community. And it was really an honor to be able to start to scratch those depths. Oh, and that's the exhibit. I hope you come later today to see it in person. So again, our exhibit is a celebration of community and the amazing ways that community has formed and reformed and changed and grown over the years. And we found that LGBTQ plus Memphians find and create community in many different ways. Sometimes it's through community organizations and what we call healing spaces. Other times it's through pride celebrations, social clubs and groups, coalitions, bars and drag, or faith communities. And so what we attempted to do is exploring community and how it's created in all of these different ways, but exploring the incredible diversity of community and how it's created, from age to ethnicity, gender expression, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. Those were all kind of lenses and layers we're hoping to bring to this exhibit, and that's just all what's here in our local LGBTQ plus community. So one aspect of this story, because I've talked for a while already, and I could talk for the rest of the day just exploring all of this, but I thought it was really relevant to focus on faith and some of the aspects of the story of faith in the LGBTQ plus community of the Mid-South. So at the outset of this project, I was really lucky enough to kind of take lead on exploring this relationship between LGBTQ plus folks of the Mid-South and of Memphis and faith. And I'll just say it by no means I'm an expert in this. So I know a lot of people in this room have probably lived this. So I'm just presenting a small slice of what I've been able to learn. And how I came to some of my findings and my kind of dipping my toes into this really big and nuanced topic began with a search of open and accepting churches in Memphis and really just cold emailing, figuring out who I knew that was a part of that congregation that might be able to make those connections with me. So that really allowed me to connect with some incredible folks across our city, and I feel really lucky to have been able to have the conversations I've had with all sorts of people of all sorts of faiths, including your own Reverend Walters. Some time to chat with me and just kind of talk me through some things that we've been thinking about and hearing from our folks on the Community Advisory Committee. And so through those conversations, I really learned that it's complicated. Faith in the LGBTQ plus community is a really complicated, nuanced topic, and I think everyone has their own personal journey and relationship to how they're bringing their identity to their faith. And I think acknowledging, too, that for many folks, religion is weaponized against your identity, and we can't nor that a lot of people face a lack of acceptance from kind of faith communities as well as individuals within certain faith communities, and from family members, and then just society at large, right? Like, it's important to name that. But then beyond that, I realized that in Memphis, that does exist, and that is a true, real thing for a lot of people. But for a lot of folks in the LGBTQ plus community, it's through faith that you're finding your place and your people, and that kind of broader acceptance. So within thinking about LGBTQ plus Memphians and their faith, I realized too there are a lot of denominational differences. So it differs the relationship between a church as an organization and their congregants or LGBTQ plus people. It varies faith tradition by faith tradition, and then sometimes individual church by individual church, depending on church leadership, the congregation, all of that. So what acceptance and inclusion looks like and means varies. So just a personal example, I grew up Roman Catholic, and within the Catholic tradition, there is not like an open and affirming designation that a church or a parish diocese can pursue. So the way it functions in Memphis is there's a Catholic ministry with gay and lesbian persons. So it's a hospitality-based ministry, and it's all about bringing people together, feeding them, having a conversation. So that's really different than some other faiths, like Temple Israel is a Keshet-approved organization or church. So they went through a whole process with a third-party nonprofit to get that kind of approval. So they had to meet a lot of standards. So it really kind of varies what certain churches go through, what inclusivity looks like within them. I also realized, too, that there are a lot of intersections, and that everyone is on their own personal journey of acceptance or self-acceptance. And the role of the church varies because people operate in the world in different ways based on their identities and who they are. So I think being open and affirming and the relationship between a church and someone who identifies as LGBTQ plus plays out differently if you go to a predominantly black church versus a predominantly white church. I think there are other different social kind of constructs that come into play. So it's a really, again, nuanced conversation to have, and everyone is kind of in their own place, in their own journey with that kind of acceptance. And then finally, open and affirming designation. So I spoke earlier about, certain churches or denominations have an official, like, you are open and affirming designation that a church can work towards. And sometimes they're a really formal process to receive the designation, and for some churches, like I said, there isn't a designation that exists, but sometimes that stems from, we've always been this way. We've always had LGBTQ plus people, and we don't need a word slapped on our website or a word that we use to communicate that because it's in our DNA and the fabric of who we are. And sometimes that comes from churches that were founded of, for, and by LGBTQ plus people. So it's very obvious we did this very intentionally. So those are just some of the kind of higher, overarching things that we learned. But I want to let you all hear directly from some of the folks who participated in our oral history project to talk about their personal relationships to faith and faith communities in Memphis. So I've got 2 clips I'll play. See if I can play it with this. Thank you. Who you see on the screen, this is Ray Rico, who helped us with the oral history project, and he's going to be speaking with Reverend Rob Van Ness, formerly of Holy Trinity Community Church, and learning about Reverend Van Ness's path towards being involved with Holy Trinity. And pardon my horrible video editing, so it just kind of jumps in.
That you wanted to seek faith and become a pastor?
Well, I was involved in 12-step meetings, and if you don't know anything about 12-step meetings, one of the linchpins when you first start out is there's these 12 steps, and at the very beginning, you need to claim a higher power who you believe can do for you what you cannot do for yourself. And they suggest that one of the ways that you do this is through prayer. And I would pray, and nothing would happen. And after 6 months, I went back to my first sponsor, and I'm like, I don't believe in God. I don't get this. There's nothing there. I feel like an idiot when I pray, like I'm talking into the air. What is going on? And so I shared that with Loretta, and she took me to Holy Trinity. And at Holy Trinity, it was the first time for so many things in my life, right? It was certainly the first time I was in a church, a community of faith, where the men were sitting with the men that they love, and the women were sitting with the women that they love. And there's various people at different points in transition based on how they identify themselves, which may or may not be different from how they were born and identified initially. And it just blew my mind. And so when I was at Holy Trinity and I'd see these couples who had been together for 20 or 30 years and they're holding hands and they kiss each other on the cheek, or I see other couples who have adopted children, and one family who had children and grandchildren, and it was all by family of choice and adoption. Really, all these people saying, I'm going to have this life and I can be a good person and no one can take that away from me. I had never seen that before. But for me, the gay bars were not a safe space, right? It was kill or be killed, right? It was trying to survive, and there was a cost to everything. And that's what led me into my addictions. And coming out of my addictions, I needed a new worldview. I needed a new way to see things. And Holy Trinity gave that to me. I just saw a bunch of people who, from the outside looking in, you would think, these people have nothing in common whatsoever, right? And they just loved the hell out of each other. And I wanted to be like that. I wanted what they had.
I see so many people doing.
This is my horrible video editing. Sorry. So that was just one person's perspective on their relationship with faith and finding a community of faith that was able to support them in a lot of different ways. I'll play one more clip.
That you want.
Oh, sorry, Ray, no. I'll play one more clip. This one, again, Ray Rico, he's interviewing Elder Gwen Clemens, who's involved with the Cathedral of Praise Church of Memphis. Thank you for the tech
bias
support.
against you growing up. You all formed the Cathedral of Praise in 2012. Can you talk to me about why that was important for y'all to create, excuse me, in the safe space that it has?
Well, it really wasn't created for gay people. Okay, so I really want to make that clear, because we do not proclaim that we are a gay church, because every church is a gay church, if that's the case. Every church in the United States and in the world is a gay church, because you have people that, even whether you know it or not, they are members of your congregation. But what was important for us was to show individuals that God loves you, regardless of who you identify as. Like, you can be a transgender and come and God loves you. You can be a transgender and serve in ministry, where we were denied access to ministry. You can be a woman and come and serve in this ministry. You can be a woman and preach in this ministry, because there are churches now that a woman cannot even stand in the pulpit. She have to stand on the floor right now today in 2022. Yes, still, yes. So that was really kind of like transforming the culture, transforming the dynamics of what ministry should look like. When you have this big church in Memphis have a sign up that says, everybody is welcome, right? No, everybody is not welcome at that church. But you have churches that say everybody's welcome, whereas everybody is welcome. Like, it really mean and they embrace you, whoever you are. You come and you can be a part of this ministry. You can come and we welcome you into our doors.
Can you talk to me about black and white men together?
Again, horrible editing, but that's a good bit too that I had to cut off. But so just another example of someone's personal journey with faith and feeling embraced as their whole and authentic self. So I know I've been waxing poetical about how much I love this exhibit and all of the amazing community support, but I wanted to leave you all with a couple of the Calvary connections you might see when you come and look at the exhibit. So Calvary plays a role in the story of LGBTQ plus faith communities in Memphis in a few different ways. And again, for some of you, I will not be sharing anything new. In fact, you probably know more than I do about some of this, but I just thought it'd be fun to share with you all some of the ways that, as a congregation, you've impacted LGBTQ plus community in Memphis. So the first thing I'll talk about is Integrity Memphis. And so you won't see too much about integrity in the exhibit, and that's because there was so much to talk about, but here's my chance to briefly tell you all about it. So Integrity Memphis comes from Integrity USA, which was served in the Episcopal Church, and it was kind of a nonprofit organization whose mission was to promote understanding between the gay community and the church. Integrity Memphis was the local chapter of Integrity, began when 4 men, 2 from Calvary and 2 from St. Mary's, got together and started thinking about, we want to have a conversation and how we can support LGBTQ plus people, find support for ourselves within the Episcopal faith in Memphis. So Integrity founded in 1991, and you can see from this article to the chagrin of the bishop at the time. I mean, it's a tough thing, right? Again, I talked about personal journeys, but one thing I think that's really commendable is your vestry voted on whether or not Integrity Memphis should be able to meet here, and your vestry voted that yes, Integrity Memphis should be able to meet here. And so those meetings turned into these amazing monthly gatherings where there was a dinner, you could bring a few dollars, pitch in, enjoy a good meal. There was a short worship service, and then a program which invited speakers from other denominations, speakers from across the community to come and talk about something relevant to the lives of LGBTQ plus people in Memphis. And this wasn't just for folks of the Episcopal faith tradition. A lot of people from other faith traditions found community here as well at Integrity Memphis and here at Calvary. Another time that Calvary kind of shows up and helps create community, faith community in Memphis was on September 25th of 2000, when over 400 people packed into your church to hear Judy Shepard, hate crime victim Matthew Shepard's mother, speak of the prejudice that led to her son's death. So you see her pictured here, kind of in the purple with the flowers, with a bunch of members from Maggie, which was the Memphis area gay youth. They were a youth group here. But in addition to Judy Shepard speaking, 400 people showing up, Mayor Harrington was present and instituted Memphis Against Hate Crimes Day. And as this event was getting publicized, there were some threats of protest. So that was the reality, but that didn't stop you all in your church from hosting this event, creating an opportunity for Memphians to be able to hear from Judy and think about how we can have a little bit less hate in our hearts. And just a fun fact, the Shepherds came back to Memphis in 2017 to meet with local leaders and law enforcement here at the National Civil Rights Museum for a hate crime summit. Turns out that after Matthew's death, Coretta Scott King sent the Shepherds a letter saying, "I was stunned and deeply saddened to learn of the killing of your beloved son, Matthew. His beautiful spirit will live on in the hearts of those he touched. Sincerely, Coretta Scott King." And I think that just shows the history of activism in Memphis and how there are a lot of intersections within different civil rights struggles and how they play out in Memphis. And finally, you all might know this exact visual, but another way that a lot of churches in Memphis kind of minister to LGBTQ plus people in the LGBTQ plus community is through kind of work and raising awareness and supporting people living with HIV and AIDS. So David Johnson was inspired to create this beautiful fabric sculpture you see in this photo after attending a healing service here at Calvary, healing around HIV and AIDS. And each gap signifies an individual whose life has been impacted by AIDS. Sculpture is installed here annually for World AIDS Day. And you'll actually be able to see this exact photo in the exhibit, along with a list of statements from all different churches, stating firmly and proudly that they're open and accepting. And this, I think this sculpture is a really powerful symbol and way to kind of honor those who were affected by HIV/AIDS in the LGBTQ plus community. And while it's not, HIV and AIDS is not solely something that affects the LGBTQ plus community, there's no denying the way that the disease has ravaged the community in the past, and still the stigma that's present today. So this is just another powerful symbol and a way that you all create a feeling of inclusivity and welcome within your church and for Memphians of faith. Wrong way. So with that, I've talked to you all for a really long time, but I thought I would, if I haven't overstepped my time limit, I just want to thank you all again and maybe open the floor up for any questions or comments.
Since we are talking about the Episcopal Church, I don't know how many of you realize that Matthew Shepard is buried in the crypt of our National Cathedral.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Vincent.
Others? Other comments or questions?
I don't know if you can answer this, but I was really surprised to hear that Memphis has the largest population of gays over all these major metropolitan cities. Do you have an understanding of why that is?
So the statistic I mentioned earlier is talking very generally about the South, but I can speak to the fact that Memphis in many ways is like a regional kind of big player for LGBTQ plus community, and a lot of folks would travel into Memphis from some of the smaller surrounding communities. So I think just because Memphis is a larger city, we've been able to kind of grow in that role and reputation as being able to be a place where people can come and be accepted and find accepting community. And that's, I think the history of this city as well as something I see moving forward into the future. But as far as specific kind of population fluxes, I unfortunately can't speak to that specifically, but that's a really good question. And that would be something worth kind of investigating in the future, is like, as far as people moving and communities growing, like, what is it here? So thank you for that.
I was just wondering, in exploring all this, if you've thought about like where you might take a piece of this and keep it in the Pink Palace permanently.
Yes, so thank you for that. Kind of thinking about this idea of sustained engagement, what we're doing with this history. So as of right now, the exhibit will close on September 26th. So I think that really presents an opportunity for us to start dreaming of what our next exhibit programming is and how we're going to continue to honor this community and include this history in our exhibit. So it's something I can say personally in my role is a lens I'll be bringing to everything I do in the future, and thinking about infusing that representation and inclusivity in all of our interpretation, no matter what the topic is. Like, it's something I just hope to bring forward. But really, we just keep saying we're just the tip of the iceberg. So I think we've been able to hear some really incredible opportunities for future exhibit topics. But another way we will continue this is through our programming and through our community engagement team. And they're doing some incredible work to engaging with folks and keeping the story out there. So I think as of right now, we're in the stages of figuring out what does that next level of engagement look like.
Now, as far as you were talking about Memphis being a sort of a magnet in the tri-state area for gay and lesbian people and everybody else in that acronym, which is entirely too long. It gets longer. That's the short version. It comes back to the big question that I hear so often is, why do we do Pride every year? Somebody in that crowd watching that parade is no longer alone. And that's why we take the trouble to do it every year, because we've all been that person. But we know it's a given that one person at least will have never been affirmed like that before.
And that really speaks to what we've learned about the power, or just, me personally, I'm an emerging professional, I'm newish to my field, I'm learning and growing a lot, but just this exhibit has been a masterclass in the power of seeing people represented. And like that is just a personal takeaway. And I think why this has been so rewarding for me to work on is like nothing matches having people walk into a room and be like, here it is. And maybe it's not perfect, but here it is. So been incredible to work on for that reason, among many. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Dorothy. One more.
I'm just going to put up a little plug for some of our upcoming programming. Definitely come to the museum for these events, including our first ever drag show we'll host. We're very excited.
Ms. Dorothy, what was the most surprising thing that you found during your research as you prepared all this material that you just couldn't believe it? Wow.
That is such a good question. I feel like I was constantly surprised. Maybe it shouldn't have been a surprise to me, but I would say the biggest surprise is for a museum that's never had an exhibit specifically dedicated to this community and its history. The way if I came and knocked on a door, the door flew open and people just invited me in. Like, again, I probably shouldn't have been surprised because that's kind of the Memphis way in a lot of ways. It was just the way that we were so fully embraced and people wanted to support. And I think, again, that nostalgic connection people had of remembering going to the Pink Palace and the idea of being able to help us tell this story really, I think that's something that, again, shouldn't have surprised me, but was such a pleasant surprise.
Thank you. Let's clap again. Thank you, Dorothy. Thanks for sharing the story. Just a reminder, you can see the exhibit itself today with your Calvary friends at 2:30 or sometime before the end of the month. It closes at the end of September. So come and join us today at 2:30. We'll go through the exhibit and then have some conversation afterwards. And a little plug, because it's my job, pick up one of these and see the exciting conversations that are coming up. We will pick up the conversation about work and labor next Labor Day Sunday. And then in September, welcome Kat Gordon and Andy Nix and other folks to talk about the intersection of work and faith in our lives. So I hope to see you back here again. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.